DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Do you want to know what's happening in the Finger Lakes? We do too. We're going in depth with decision makers in the heart of upstate New York to get the answers you need. From the team of FingerLakes1.com, this is Inside the FLX.
All right, welcome back to Inside the FLX. Today I am joined in studio by Chris Lajewski from the Montezuma Audubon Center. He's here for our monthly chat about birds and all things water, as it would be. Fall is finally here. It's fall. It feels like fall outside. You just came in from the outside. Tell us about it. What's it like out there?
Yeah, it's not raining right now. It's actually a quite pleasant early fall afternoon here in the FLX. I was out with donors leading a birding excursion for them this morning. Saw a lot of signs of early fall here in the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. Obviously, the foliage has been turning for the last couple weeks, noticing more of the reds and yellows. It was first the poison ivy and Virginia creeper that started to turn red, really adding to the color. It was really nice, and now we're starting to get some of the trees starting to turn. In terms of bird activity, noticing more waterfowl.
Yeah.
Out there. We had a few really good looks at some great egrets and sandhill cranes in the area. Quite a few duck species and marsh birds. Duck species were the green-winged teal, blue-winged teal, a couple of nice looks at male wood ducks, quite striking in plumage. They're rainbow-colored ducks, I like to call them. They got just about every color of the rainbow on them. And then mallards and a few other duck species. Bald eagles were quite prevalent, both soaring and sitting perched. We didn't see any juvenile bald eagles today, but over the course of this summer, we have seen a lot of juveniles in the area. The other striking species of the day was northern harrier, which is a hawk species, about the size of a red-tailed hawk, but its habitat is different than the red-tail. Northern harrier is going to hunt in marsh and grassland habitats fairly low to the ground, so they might only be 3-4 feet over the ground, looking and listening for small mammals and even songbirds for food. Their tail, though, is noticeably longer than a red-tailed hawk, and they also have a white patch right at the base of their back. So we saw several of those out hunting during the morning excursion today.
I have to ask, I would imagine it's a bit of a roll of the dice. You don't know, in a bird excursion like that, you don't really know what you're going to see for sure. How often when you go out into the refuge or just out sort of walking about out there that you kind of get caught off guard, or you get, didn't expect to see that? Is that like a regular occurrence, or is that not as often because of how much time you're spending out there?
It happens quite a lot during migration.
Yeah.
And we're certainly well into bird migration right now. Bird migration in the fall season really starts in late July, could be early August, with shorebirds coming in. About a month ago, there was a pair of wood stork found down here in Seneca Falls, actually just up the road, just outside of town, north side of town here. There was a well-known birder who first found these 2 wood storks that should be down along the Gulf Coast states. And they were sitting in some trees right along a soybean field. Very strange. Just a few days prior to those birds being identified and found, we had one of those tropical systems come up from the Gulf Coast. So it's likely that the wood storks got caught up in the wind of this hurricane, and then once the wind subsided, they were looking for a refuge. And certainly this Finger Lakes region, so close to the refuge, was a perfect spot for them. I was able to get my eyes on them. I was probably the last one to see them, because I saw them riding thermals and heading up in altitude and then drifting south, and they weren't seen in our area after that.
Wow.
So it does happen. Now is a great time to get out and explore this whole Montezuma Wetlands Complex, there's 20,000 acres of public land. We have 30 miles of designated trails, both down here at the National Wildlife Refuge as well as up on the state land up in Savannah. We have 200 acres, 2 miles of trails right at the Montezuma Audubon Center. And the weather looks fairly decent, I mean mild enough over the next week, probably a couple of weeks, that paddling opportunities abound. So there are 8 canoe and kayak boat launch locations. And if folks are interested in learning about all these areas that we have available to them, publicly accessible and free for all, that we have all our maps on our website, which is ny.audubon.org/Montezuma.
Those 80, 85 degree days this time of year, no effect on the birds that are coming and going, right? That's just something they're accounting for, and no real impact on what folks are seeing day to day if they're going out for a walk, right?
Folks may find fewer birds, and there might be fewer birds singing and moving about during those intensely warm days. They're going to maybe find some secluded areas, some shaded areas, just trying to get out of the heat, reduce stress, make it easier on themselves. Generally, early in the morning, first few hours after sunrise, and then again late in the day, last few hours of the day before sunset are better times to find birds, and they're going to be active, they're going to be feeding, they might be a little bit more vocal.
Muck race recap. Talk to us a little bit about that. That's got to be a pretty interesting event for you guys.
Well, this was our 27th annual Montezuma Muck Race, and it's a 24-hour birding competition that we host at Montezuma Audubon Center every year on behalf of the Friends of the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. This year we had record number of participation. 40 teams participated,
awesome,
including 6 collegiate teams. Cornell and Hobart William Smith were both represented this year. We had families coming out, photography teams where they can only count the bird if they are able to capture it on film or digitally or on video. Pretty impressive. And then there's recreational and competitive teams as well as the low carbon team, which is actually a no carbon team. So you're not allowed to use a gas powered vehicle of any sort, boat or vehicle. Anyway, so you can hike or ride your bike or paddle around to look for as many birds as you can. And this year we found collectively 177 bird species back just a couple weeks ago during that 24-hour period, which is about average for us. A lot of songbirds, the warblers and vireos continue to migrate through the Montezuma area. Waterfowl we're starting to be noticed more frequently, as well as the birds of prey, the falcons, the hawks. We had our 3 resident owl species hooting up at night. So great event, and we're looking to raise about $12,000 for the Friends of the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. And the Friends are a great organization because they then invest those funds in bird conservation projects that we do at the Audubon Center, and then our colleagues at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and New York State DEC as well. 24
hours, that's got to require a little bit of strategy on parts of those teams. Divide and conquer, out there for all 24 hours, how's that approached?
Every team has their own philosophy and approach. My team, there were 6 of us. We had a lot of fun. We had our Audubon staff as well as some of our friends at the Audubon Center. And we certainly did not spend all 24 hours out there. We were out there about 14 hours, though, total. If you're birding, you have to stay together as a team. So as long as you're not a competitive team, the whole team doesn't have to be out there. If somebody needed some rest or could only bird for a few hours, it's okay. But if you're a competitive team, everyone has to identify the bird positively 100%, and you have to stay together during your birding period.
Wow, that is that sounds like a real challenge.
It's a lot of fun.
Like
the winning team this year found over 130 bird species.
Oh my gosh.
Just very impressive. These birders are so good, especially the Cornell University students. They are just top-notch birders. They have excellent hearing, excellent eyesight. They're so good that they're able to pick out the bird songs of migratory birds at night. Those little
Wow.
chips and chirps, birds might be a couple hundred feet up in the air, and they can identify them.
That's
Amazing.
incredible. So that team effectively identified like 65+%, 70-ish percent of all of the species that were seen that 24-hour period.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Now, we did have a couple of species that are new to our muck race list, which is interesting. They're not really new to the Finger Lakes region or Montezuma, but just unusual for the early September season. One of those species was the black vulture, which is very similar to turkey vulture, which is quite common this time of year throughout the Finger Lakes. Black vulture, though, is more of a southern species. It is creeping northward and more likely found in urban areas where there might be a landfill situation or a large-scale compost area. And they are vultures, so they go after carrion, and their dead food is their food source. So, for the first time ever, black vulture made it on the list. The other species of note this year, again, typically found later in fall migration, is the white-crowned sparrow. So small, brownish bird overall with black and white stripes up on the head. We get them in the spring migration. They go further north into the boreal forest to Canada to breed. We found them a little bit earlier than average this year. Can't explain it. We were certainly warm at that time in September, so not sure why one ventured southbound, but we did find it.
And this event is held same time, roughly every year, I'm assuming.
That's
So you
right.
catch kind of like a pattern, or you know what you're expecting every year.
That's right. Yeah, it's early September. It's generally the first weekend after Labor Day. That's pretty much the peak of songbird migration as birds are heading southbound, starting to get a few waterfowl coming in. The birds of prey, the falcons in particular, are always spectacular. Both peregrine falcon, merlin, and American kestrel. Still have a lot of bald eagles in the area. Just a great time to be out. Weather is generally quite nice, and we allow birders to camp at the Audubon Center, which is a unique situation. Normally, the public isn't allowed to camp, but we had about 50 people camping on the lawn right outside the Audubon Center this year, and it's fun to be out there in your tent, in your sleeping bag, and you're adding birds to your list. You're hearing great horned owls, eastern screech owls, barred owl, while you're trying to snooze.
Okay, so that winning team, if you were estimating here, how many hours out of the 24 were they spending birding and trying to identify birds? Were they close to that 24-hour mark?
Almost. Generally, that most competitive team is out there for about 20 hours. So they might just get just a few hours, maybe between midnight and 4 a.m. Little shut eye.
Yeah.
Because then by 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning,
Morning shift.
starting to wake up. The birds are waking up a little bit. Those migratory birds that were heading south are starting to drop down out of the sky and looking for a place to shelter and rest, to feed. And those teams are amazing. They can pick up on all that.
Yeah, that is impressive. All right, let's talk about our species spotlight for this month. You mentioned it, the great egret. This is a significant bird for you guys just in general. Talk to us a little bit about what this species is all about. And actually, we're going to have a question for you after that explanation. So prepare yourself.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, the great egret is on our Audubon logo. Reason for that, it's a large, stately bird, very majestic looking, almost entirely white plumage from head to tail. The bill is long and yellow, the legs are black, and now is a great time to see them across the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. During this morning's tour, I found about 50 of them down at Shockey Pool and also at Mays Point. Some were sitting in the water and in the marsh. Others were sitting roosted in trees. The importance of this bird for National Audubon Society goes back over 100 years now. So late 1800s, the fashion of the day was for women primarily to wear hats that were adorned with bird feathers. And the great egret was one of those was prized feathers. So they were harvested to near extinction. But enough people recognized that in the 1800s and started to change rules and policies, regulations, and started to protect not only the bird but also the habitats that they needed. So that by the time the National Audubon Society was formed in 1905, population of great egrets was starting to increase again. And so because of that early conservation success, the early founders of National Audubon Society decided to put the great egret on our logo, and it's been there for nearly 120 years now. This is a bird that can be found anywhere in the Montezuma Wetlands Complex now, feeding on vegetation, aquatic insects, seed. Marshes are great places, but also lake shoreline areas are also good places to see them right now.
Right this very second. Producer Paul here, while he was preparing for the show, found a couple different images. I think you saw one of them just a minute ago up on the screen of the great egret. And then a second image that perhaps is a great egret or perhaps is not. Can you please explain what we're seeing on the screen right now?
That is great egret, and that is in breeding plumage and breeding mode. You notice the white color from head to tail and all those wing feathers, yellow bill, black legs. The great egrets that we see right now in the Montezuma Wetlands Complex are not breeding. We generally don't have breeding egrets here. If folks are seeing a great egret during the May, June, July time period, it's very likely to be juvenile birds that look very closely to the adults here. But it takes 2 to 3 years for great egrets to reach full maturity and start to breed. The birds that we see now are probably a mixture of those juvenile birds we've had for a few months and also adult great egrets that were nesting down along the coastal Carolinas and the Gulf Coast states. They have an incredible journey where after breeding, they actually wander north 1,000 miles to as many as 1,500 miles to find additional high-quality food sources and habitat. Wow. They fatten up here, they rest, refuel up here for a month or two, and then head back down to coastal Carolinas, Florida, and Gulf Coast states where they'll spend the winter months. Wow. So that's a long journey. That's 3,000 miles over the course of just a couple of months. But that long journey is so worth it when they can find the high-quality habitat and the food that they need to survive up here.
Very, very interesting, and thanks for breaking down that picture for us, because when I saw it, I thought to myself, that might not even be the same bird. Who knows? Okay, so next thing up here, we have On the Canals Autumn Birding Hikes. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we are continuing our free On the Canals outdoor adventures this fall. We've been very busy this summer with the guided kayaking excursions, great success. And we're going to roll right into fall with guided birding excursions starting this Saturday, September 28th. Now, over these 4 years that we've been offering these On the Canals programs, we've generally done them here in the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. In the interest of being more inclusive and more accessible to even more people, we're taking the show on the road. So we're going to be going to Syracuse and the Onondaga Lake shoreline, brand new trail over there for a couple of excursions. We're going to be coming here to Seneca Falls and walking the sculpture trail just on the south side of the canal, enjoying all the birds down there. And then we're going to go to Geneva and the north end of Seneca Lake, and starting at the visitor center and walking that wonderfully flat paved walk there. But these are also, accessible by people who are in wheelchairs or have some form of mobility challenge. The other location is going to be over in Rochester along the Genesee River Trail. So generally flat trails, paved or grassy trails, and we're going to enjoy time together, be out there for maybe an hour, hour and a half, less than a mile total distance traveled, and these are going to take place Saturdays and Sundays, starting this Saturday and going right on into early November. These are free, but registration is required, and we've got all the registration information on our website.
And we link to it in the show notes here as well. Lots of opportunities in lots of different places. So no matter where you are in the Finger Lakes, no matter where you're listening from, you're probably never more than maybe like 20 or 25-minute drive from one of these opportunities to get outside and see everything that's going on there. habitat restoration, volunteer opportunities, that's a year-round thing, it seems like, for you guys. So talk to us about what we're doing this time of year and how these opportunities might differ a little bit from what we were doing in June or July.
And right now, we're quite busy with the native seed collecting projects. We've had 2 very successful projects already. The seed collecting is quite a simple activity. It's really just learning how to identify 1 or 2 plants. We take care of that education to our volunteers. We focus just on 1 or 2 species. We find it's a little bit easier just to deal with 1 or 2 as opposed to the dozens of species that might be in a grassland habitat. So focusing in on that seed, we partner very closely with the Seneca Meadows Wetlands Preserve and Seneca Meadows Landfill, and they provide us access to that wetlands preserve, allow us to collect that seed. And every time we're out there, we're collecting a pound or 2 of seed, which then can restore upwards of an acre or 2. So it really makes a difference. We take that seed up to the Montezuma Wetlands Complex and restore habitat at the National Wildlife Refuge, as well as at the Audubon Center and the rest of the DEC properties. We have an event coming up this Saturday, but that's already filled up. We cannot take any more because we got 40 volunteers. Many of them are college students from SUNY Environmental Science and Forestry. Great to have those young people out there with us, and many other volunteers are going to be out. So we're not able to take on any more there. But if folks go to our website, they'll see on October 2nd and October 9th, we've got additional opportunities to get out, enjoy this beautiful time of year, and help Audubon and our colleagues at National Wildlife Refuge and DEC restore grassland habitat across the complex.
Walk me through why it's necessary to go off-site, or why someone's probably asking right now, why do you have to go off-site to get seed or to collect seed to restore? Is it because of certain things being lacking in certain areas of the refuge, or is there some other reason for that? What's the logic behind it, I guess?
The Seneca Meadows Wetlands Preserve was a restoration project many years ago, seeded and planted with a great variety of native plants. We have grassland habitats up at the refuge as well as on the DEC properties, but we're still trying to enhance and enlarge those areas.
Yeah.
So we don't, sometimes, especially when we go into wetlands and are focused on wetland plants, we will collect seed in our areas here in Montezuma. But in terms of grassland, we primarily focus on the Seneca Meadows Wetlands Preserve, collect that seed, dry it out, and then sow it maybe this later fall season, or sometimes we'll wait until the following spring and get into those grassland areas just as plants are starting to germinate here, lay that seed down and get that seed to germinate. So, you know, it's a great partnership that we have with our friends at Seneca Meadows Wetlands Preserve. Can't thank them enough. The other great thing about these volunteer opportunities is after a morning of work, we'll be out there for maybe 2.5, 3 hours collecting seed. We provide all the equipment, the information that our volunteers are going to need. We enjoy lunch together. And when we're down here in Seneca Falls, we'll typically go down to downtown Delhi and grab a bite, grab a sub there. And the subs and lunches are provided by our friends of the Montezuma Wetlands Complex.
Impressive. And again, one of the themes that always comes up in these conversations is just how it's a constant work. It's a constant effort to maintain everything that you see in the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. It's a work of nature, but also an impressive feat of man as well.
And woman and child as well, because it really takes an army of volunteers. There aren't enough of us staff working in the complex to manage and restore the 20,000 acres of public land. This year alone, we have already worked with over 300 volunteers, and we've enhanced or restored nearly 200 acres of habitat. But we need to continue this annually. We're always looking for new volunteers, whether you're 16 or 96, there is something for you at Montezuma Wetlands Complex.
And speaking of the kids, youth pheasant hunt coming up. It's the last event here we have to talk about. Talk to us about that 17th annual.
Right, 17th annual Robert F. DeRoe Memorial Youth Pheasant Hunt. We kicked off our youth hunt initiative this past Saturday, actually, with a waterfowl hunter education class just for young hunters. So these are 12 to 15-year-old youth here in New York State. That's what's considered a youth hunter. Their adult mentors joined them. It could have been a family member or a friend who is also a hunter. And their role in all this is to guide the young hunters as they're both learning, they're taking the classes, and then once they're in the field or in the marsh or in the forest, being a role model for them and showing those young hunters how to be a safe and ethical hunter. So very proud of this initiative. We've been doing it since the center opened 17 years ago. And following the course, we had a great dinner. It was great to see many of our guides, our volunteers, the staff from the wetlands complex, and of course the hunters and the mentors were out as well. We had about 50 people at the Audubon Center for the dinner on Saturday. So this coming Saturday, on the 28th, is Youth Waterfowl Hunt. We filled that up. We can't take any more for that, but we are still recruiting young people to join us for our upcoming Youth Pheasant Hunt on October 12th. So we got still 3 weeks to go for that. We still have about 16 spots available. We will release the pheasants out at the Audubon Center. These are New York State DEC raised pheasants. There's going to be about 50,000 pheasants released on state land across New York, which is, it's about 20,000 acres, or 20,000 birds more than average.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be opportunities for youth to be out that weekend of Indigenous Peoples Day. And we'll have guides with dogs. There's probably going to be 3 or 4 young people hunting with each guide and dog right at the Audubon Center. Our friends from the Wayne County Federation of Sportsmen Clubs will provide the lunch following that. So big event, a lot of fun, a great introduction to hunting, and hopefully a lifelong passion and interest in being an ethical and safe hunter.
Judging from the things I've seen on social media, these have to be some of your most popular events all year among kids, right?
For sure. And the exciting thing is this could be a foot in the door to the National Audubon Society.
Yeah.
We then have additional opportunities for these young people and their families and mentors to come out to get involved in seed collecting activities or turkey surveys or deer surveys, or continue to hunt on public land or private land and help us keep populations in balance with the ecosystem. And that's one of our primary focuses with these youth hunts is keeping resident Canada geese populations lower and trying to keep it back get it back in balance, and white-tailed deer as well. Again, overabundant at Montezuma and many places in New York. And of course, white-tailed deer love to eat small vegetation, young vegetation, so seedlings, small trees, which, if left to grow for 70 years, 100 years, will eventually turn into the canopy trees where bald eagles and warblers and vireos and other birds will nest. So there is a reason, there is a direct link between hunting and bird conservation work.
We don't hear about it a lot, but I do, since you mentioned it, I do want to ask. Overpopulation of white-tailed deer, overpopulation of Canada geese. How overpopulated? Like when people just hear overpopulation, you might hear a news story or two throughout the year about it. What exactly does overpopulation look like present day?
Well, I see that every day in terms of both of those species, the Canada goose and the white-tailed deer. Canada geese are, the species is out of balance with the ecosystem here. And actually, you can think of it almost as a separate species. So the resident Canada goose is not a true wild migratory Canada goose that doesn't leave here. It's essentially a domesticated Canada goose that was created by humans about 100 years ago when those people were trying to bring back the Canada goose and waterfowl populations broadly. So they took wild Canada geese and bred them with domesticated geese, and we ended up with this Canada goose that doesn't migrate anymore, and that's the species we see here year-round. So that needs to be reduced. At the same time, we still have the migratory Canada goose population, which we're trying to bring back up, and that is only here during the migration season. So in September, actually in 2 days is the last day of the early Canada goose season, you can harvest about 15 Canada geese a day because it's almost entirely the resident Canada goose that's here. The migrants haven't come back yet.
Yeah.
Now, with the white-tailed deer, that population's out of balance. We see that because, I mean, you can see browse lines when you're driving around town or out in the fields, and you can see where trees are growing, and then there's like a straight line at the base of all the trees. Well, that's not natural. Well, it's white-tailed deer that are eating. They're over-browsing,
Yeah.
right? Talk to farmers. Farmers are having issues with white-tailed deer eating soybeans and corn. I was out hunting this past couple weeks and noticed one field where the beans are typically up to my thigh high, and they were only up to my shin.
Huh.
And that's because the white-tailed deer were in there just hammered.
Wow.
Those beans. So because of that, there's now, in some parts of the Finger Lakes region in New York State, there's a September antlerless deer hunting season. So no bucks are allowed to be taken during the season. It started September 14th, and it went through yesterday, the 22nd. You could use gun, bow, crossbow, muzzleloader, just to try to reduce the white-tailed deer population further. And when you harvest more does, you're more apt to bring down the population because does will produce generally 2 fawn every year.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, some species are out of balance, and one way we keep them in balance or try to get them back into balance is through hunting.
Geese. When should we see geese? When should we see geese here in the Finger Lakes? The migratory type, the ones that are totally natural, 100%, the ones we want to see.
Yeah, October
Okay.
is generally when we start to see them. So that's why during the September season, we're hunting out there because it's just the residents, the migrants haven't come back yet. So first 3 weeks, it's almost the whole month of October is a great time to see the migratory Canadies coming in, and we're going to see the V's, the
You'll hear 'em.
alphabet soup in the sky. We're going to be hearing the honks
Yep.
right up in the sky. Yeah. And we're going to see a lot. We're going to see 36 species of waterfowl coming through Montezuma and the whole Finger Lakes region. Once we get some more cold fronts coming through, I believe we got a cold front coming through today. It's going to drop the temperatures. Winds are going to shift around in the northwest, and we're going to get the proverbial floodgates will open to the migratory bird season.
Bring down the birds. Bring them down. Chris, thanks so much for the time. As always, appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for watching and listening to this episode of Inside the FLX. Check the show notes for links to everything we discussed today. And remember, new episodes of the show drop every Monday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the iHeartRadio app. If you have a question or a suggestion for a future episode, email news@fingerlakes1.com and download the fingerlakes1.com app for the latest breaking news. For the entire team here, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.